Another big mental, part of the mental gymnastics that I had to participate in just to keep myself a Christian was the gender issue, was the fact that the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Bible is not favorable toward women as equal beings. Greetings and salvations. Glad to catch the live. Yes, hello and welcome. We're already ranting. But I think that, as I talk about before, I was out performing so many of the guys in my high school and in my education, and yet I was getting told that I needed to submit to them in order to be happy. And I can't tell you how many times I was just like sitting there for hours on ends looking at verses in the Bible about how, Proverbs 30 or 31, whichever it is, a moral woman or a pure woman, it's outlined all of the things a woman has to do to be valuable according to Christian doctrine. And it's hard. It's hard to sit there and pretend like you aren't feeling a little bit hurt, that it's not a little bit painful to justify over and over again in your head that God loves me just as much as the men around me. They just want to protect me. Like, God just wants to protect me. That's why I need to submit to my husband. And there's this term, it's called benevolent patriarchy. And it's this way of framing patriarchy in a way that is supposedly benevolent and protective and providing. And I think that a lot of men who, even in chats here, okay, on my live streams here, even in my YouTube comments, they'll come and they'll say, okay, so you don't want a protector or a provider, like that's fine, kind of, jabbing at me because I'm not a fan of traditional gender roles. And the reality is those gender roles are holding men back too. Like keeping these rigidity of gender roles that require a man to be a protector and provider. Like if we're sticking with traditional gender roles, like why aren't these men going to war for me? Why aren't these men working the plow in the field? Is it because maybe society evolves? Is it because maybe human nature evolves and we can move past the cultural morality of our past, which, by the way, again, now looking back, was not moral by and large, I just think that it's the mental going back to the mental gymnastics of just constantly having to convince myself that I wanted to subjugate myself for men, that I wanted it, that it did strike a light in me and it made me feel safe and protected. And it's tricky because it's almost convincing to be like, yeah, I want to be safe and protected and I want to be in my soft feminine era. And there's a lot of that rhetoric even online now. It's funny because the manosphere and all of these alt-right pipelines are very often covered when we're talking about the alt-right pipeline for men specifically, but there is an alt-right pipeline for women, and it takes the form of tradwife content, but it's also a little bit more subtle in soft living. What's another one? Oh, feminine energy, divine feminine energy, all of this stuff. I go back and forth because I do think it is useful to stop valuing hustle culture. It is useful to critique the go, 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 always be on your grind part of capitalism and patriarchy. But at the same time, it's so tricky to separate what it means to just be accountable for your own nervous system versus living in your soft feminine energy, like a lot of these content creators talk about, in a way that does not empower women to be full-rounded human beings who can do whatever the fuck they want. So it's weird. It's tricky. It's okay that everyone is trying to approach the issue of patriarchy in their own way. And it's okay that maybe not everyone is as critical as I am, because I will be critical enough for the majority of us, don't worry. The cognitive dissonance of being in the evangelical Christian church is just, it's just too much. It was just too much for me. And again, it really broke down when we were talking about men versus women. Another really cool part of leaving the Christian faith is not having to go to church on a regular basis. Now, this is kind of both a positive and a negative because Sunday mornings are mine again. Well, actually, now that I'm live streaming, it's ours again. But just in general, like I wake up, the sun is out, there's coffee, maybe even pancakes. No one is telling me that I'm a wretched human being whose thoughts are sinful unless, they include a Jewish carpenter from 2,000 years ago. Like that feels very freeing that I don't have to wake up and just immediately be indoctrinated with Christian mythology. And the brunch, for a while, I was substituting church for brunch with my friends. Immaculate. The vibes were immaculate. I loved that. But then on the flip side, that is also one of the negative downfalls of not going to church anymore. If I'm being totally honest, it's the lack of community. Actually, I kind of take that back because at first it's very difficult not to have that community anymore. At first, it's very difficult to not see the same people every single week outside of church and outside of your home. Like that is what church was, the third space for all of us for such a long time. And that is hard to replace. And someone actually brought this up in a very sincere and honest way in the Kayse and Friends Discord. If you guys haven't checked out the Discord, I've linked it everywhere I can. Do get yourself an invite. And we have some of the more deeper conversations in the private channels. If you want to either subscribe on Twitch or become a member on YouTube, both it's just $4.99 a month. And we can have these conversations all day long because I know you guys just can't get enough of me. Someone brought up how difficult it is for them to meet people in a third space, for them to build community now that they're not religious anymore. And this is hard for a lot of us. This is a really big draw to the Christian church, and it's totally valid. It's totally real. Well, any, religious church, or religious gatherings on a weekly basis. And one thing that I bring up is the fact that a lot of people who are approaching their connectivity and their connection with other people and their community building is from a secular point of view, they're doing this by joining more interest specific groups. Okay. And this can look like everything from rock climbing or fantasy football groups to D&D games, to the local board game nights, okay? And I totally understand that a lot of people are dealing with more social anxiety than ever because of the internet and COVID, and I get all of that. But it is, in a lot of ways, it's the same socially anxious hurdles that we would have to overcome if we were going to church. Do you know what I mean? The main difference there versus going to a photography club or a book club or a running club versus going to church is that you don't feel like you have to go to the running club. So it's almost harder to go. It's there's not a virtue attached to joining, a volunteer work group. There is virtue in that. That's not a good example, but there's not a virtue attached to going to your local bird watching club. And you don't feel like a bad person if you don't go. So it's almost there's not as much motivation. Community building outside of the church is also something I bring up in relation to the gender question of why it is that so many young men are returning to church. There's a lot of studies that have been done about this. I'm not the first one to bring this up. But a lot of young men find it more difficult to build third spaces outside of work and outside of the workplace and home. And unfortunately, the religious right offers them a sense of community as a third space a lot more easily than a lot of other kinds of, groups and organizations and stuff. And part of this is conditioning. Part of this is the fact that women from birth are conditioned to be more empathetic and emotionally intelligent. And so it's I would argue, like, I'm not basing this off of anything I've actually studied, but from my experience, I would argue that it is easier for women to just go somewhere and make friends because we are so community oriented, because we have to be from birth. Like, it's a survival mechanism. It is kind of forced on us when we have to be caretakers. And unfortunately for men, like, it's forced on them. The forced conditioning is that they have to be these providers and protectors, and they have to view other men in a sense of competition. And so that is why like, the trend that we're seeing is, by and large, young men are feeling more welcome in a hierarchical community like a church, where there is someone from the pulpit telling them what they should or shouldn't do, where there is a divine male authority figure telling them what they should or shouldn't do to be valuable, to be good enough. And it sucks, and it's really hard for, and then, that's why we're seeing the split in like Gen Z and the younger generation, where more young men are falling into the religious right pipeline, and more young women are leaving the patriarchal narratives of the church, because we're like, yeah, this isn't even for me. Whereas, like, religion is by men and for men. So I guess I'll hang out over here and do tarot and read my astrology chart, which I know a lot of atheists in my content, in my, like, audience hate. They're like, they're not a fan of me talking about that stuff, but whatever.